everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Mathematics. And today we are looking at a very interesting topic. The last time we looked at factorizing algebraic expressions, and today we are taking it a step further. We'll be looking at a special type of expression. Today we'll be looking at factorizing quadratic expression. And at the end of this video, you should be able to do a few things. One, you should be able to identify the general form of a quadratic expression. Two, you should be able to identify A, B, and C in a quadratic expression. And lastly, most importantly, you will be able to factorize a quadratic using the AC method. And these are the three things that you must know after this video has ended. So let's head straight into the first thing. The general form of a quadratic. Now, we have many types of expressions that you will come across, but there's a special kind of expression that is named the quadratic expression. And when you see a quadratic expression, you must treat it a certain way. So we must be able to identify how a quadratic expression will look. And that is what the general form will tell us. It's like if you have a dog. How do you know a dog is a dog? First of all, the dog has 4 feet, it has a tail, and it has long pointed ears. So when you see an animal that fit that characteristic, you know that it's a dog. And in the same way, when you see an expression looking a certain way, you should know that it's a quadratic expression. So let's head into this general form of a quadratic expression. So the general form is ax squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c. So the general form is ax squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c. Now the a, b, and c, they are just there in place of a number. But this is the general form. When you see an equation looking like this, with an x squared term, a term without a square, and a number by itself, you know that it's a quadratic. So let me give you an example of a quadratic. So we have 2x squared minus 5x plus 3. So this is an example of what a quadratic will look like. 2x squared minus 5x plus 3. Now as you can see there, the 2, the negative 5, and the 3, they're just in place of A, B, and C. But this is an example of what a quadratic will look like. We have the plus or minus because it can be plus or minus. And the same thing here, plus or minus. Sometimes it will be plus, sometimes it will be minus. So let's head into some more examples. So the first example, we have 6x squared plus 11x plus 3. Now we want to identify what is A, what is B, and what is C. Now A will always be the number that is in front of the x squared term. That is A, that was always A, regardless of where A falls in the quadratic. A is always the coefficient of the x squared. So in this case, A will be equal to 6. Now some persons get carried away and they think A will always be the first number that is in the quadratic. Now sometimes this thing can be mixed up and A will not fall on the first term. So you just got to be careful and remember that A is the number that is in front of the x squared term. Now B, in this example, B would be the number in front of the x term, the coefficient of x. So in this case, B will be the coefficient of x, which is 11. And C would always be the number by itself, the constant, the number without any variable, without any letter. So in this case, C would be equal to 3. So let's look at another example. Let's say we have 3x squared minus 2x plus 7. Of course, we see A is the number in front of the x squared term. So A in this example will be 3. B in this example would be, now we got to be careful with B now. We see there's a 2 in front of the x, but there's a sign in front of that 2. Now whatever sign is in front of a number, whatever minus or plus, that is a sign that is governing that number. So in this case, B would be negative 2. And C would be 7, the number by itself. Let's do another example. Let's say we have x squared plus 7x minus 3. And we want to identify what is A, B, and C. So we see A is the number in front of the x squared term. In this case, we don't see any number in front of the x squared term. So we know that A is equal to 1. And you don't see any number, you don't see any coefficient, we know once we don't see a coefficient, we know that the coefficient is 1. So A in this case is equal to 1. And B will of course be equal to 7. And C, we take our time with C, we see C is equal to a negative 3 because there's a negative sign in front of the 3. So C is equal to negative 3. Let's do a last example. Let's say we have negative 4x plus 2x squared minus 9. And we want to identify what is A, B, and C. So in this case, we see A. Now, many persons will rush and say that A is equal to negative 4. But we have to remember that A is the number, the coefficient in front of the x squared term. So in this case, we see A is not equal to negative 4. A is equal to 2. Because 2 is the number in front of the x squared term. And we see B is equal to negative 4. And last but not least, we see C is equal to negative 9. And that is a very crucial part of factorizing a quadratic. We must be able to identify what is A, B, and C. If we don't effectively identify what is A, B, and C, then we are already putting ourselves in a bad light to work with quadratics. So now that we have a good understanding of identifying A, B, and C, let's look at how we factorize a quadratic. So I have a list of steps that you will have to follow to factorize a quadratic. So we have the example here, factorize the following: 6x squared plus 11x plus 3. And we want to factorize this quadratic. So the first step, it says, I will take off as we go. Step 1 says, identify A, B, and C. So let me draw down a line here. So we identify A, B, and C. So in this example, we see A is equal to 6, B is equal to 11, and C is equal to 3. That is step 1, identify A, B, and C. So we are already good there. Step 2, we multiply A by C. Now, this method that we're using, it's called the AC method. So it's important to find the value of AC. So we multiply A by C and that will give you AC. That's why it's called the AC method, because we have to multiply A by C. So AC will be, the value of A is 6, multiplied by the value of C, which is 3. So AC will be 18. And this is the value of AC. AC is very important here. So you multiply A by C to give you AC. So now that we find AC, this is the crucial part. This step that I'm about to move on to, this is the crucial step. This is the step that, causes problems for many students. This is the part that, gives a lot of licks. So you have to be careful with this part. After you finish identifying AC, next thing to do is to identify two numbers. And these two numbers must be very special. Two factors, I should say. So two factors, when you multiply these two numbers, you should get the value of AC, which is 18. But also, when we add these two same numbers, we should get B. We should get the value of B, whatever B is. In this case, B is 11. So we want two numbers. When we multiply it, we should get whatever AC is. And when we add those two same numbers, we should get B, which is 11 in this case. So we can go through the factors of 18. So we see 6 times 3 is 18, but 6 plus 3 would give you 9. And we see B is equal to 11, so that can't work. So we think of another factor that will give, another two factors that will give you 18. So let's try 9 multiplied by 2 would indeed give me 18. And then when I add 9 plus 2, that would give me 11. So the two special numbers that we use would be 9 plus 2, because those are the two numbers that are suitable to do the next step. So after we finish finding these two special numbers, the next thing is to substitute these two numbers, basically to replace the middle part here with these two numbers. Let me ask yourself, why do we replace the bx term with these two numbers? Now, the reason why we do it, because in the previous example, in the previous class, we looked at factorizing normal expressions, and we had four terms. So when we have four terms, we saw that it was easier to factorize. So the whole aim of doing these steps is to turn these three terms into four terms so that we can, do the same thing like what we did in the previous video. So we have 9 plus 2, and we're taking these two numbers and we're replacing them with this middle term here, the bx term. So this now would become 6x squared plus 9, but we can't just put 9 alone. We must attach whatever variable is here. We must put that variable with the two numbers. This would be 9x plus 2x plus 3. And if we go and we simplify 9x plus 2x, we see we'll get 11x. So it's like if we expanded it with two suitable numbers, you can't just use any two numbers because our answer would be wrong. So that is why we had to go through the steps of finding AC and then finding two suitable numbers that will multiply to give you AC and then add to give you the B, and then we replace the B with those two numbers. So that is why we had to go through those steps. So the next thing now, we have four terms. And of course, we know what to do when we have four terms. We pair off. So we bracket off, and then we do like what we did in the previous video. We factorize each bracket individually. So we look at the first two terms in the first bracket, 6x squared plus 9x. And we look at the numbers first, 6 and 9. And we think about what is the highest factor between 6 and 9. So we see that highest factor is 3. And then we look at x squared and x. And we think to ourselves, what is the highest factor between x squared and x? So we see x is the highest factor. So we factor out the 3x. So when we factor out 3x from 6x squared, we know when we factor out, we're actually dividing. So 6x squared divided by 3x, that would give you 2x plus, and when we factor out the 3x from the 9x, we know 9x divided by 3x, this x will go with that x, 9 divided by 3 would give you 3. So we're left with plus 3. And then we move on to the second bracket now. And we look at 2 and we look at 3. We don't have any numbers. Well, we have a number in common, which is 1. So we factor out that plus 1. So remember, whatever sign is in front here, we always factor out that sign. So we factor out the plus 1. And when we factor out plus 1 from this bracket, we see nothing will change. So we just left with 2x plus 3. 2x divided by 1 will give you 2x. And 3 divided by 1 will give you 3. So now we see our two brackets are the same. And that is a very important step. And we know once our brackets are the same, we are doing something correct. So what we do now, we take what is outside the bracket, which would be the 3x and the 1, and we put it in a bracket by itself. So this will be 3x plus 1. We put that in the bracket. And then we bring down one of the two brackets that are the same. So this will be 2x plus 3. And that is how you factorize a quadratic. Just follow the steps. Step 1, identify A, B, and C. Step 2, multiply A by C. Step 3, find two suitable numbers that when you multiply them, you get AC. And when you add these two same numbers, you should get whatever B is in this case. And step 4, you substitute the BX term with these two numbers. And then the last step, you pair off and you factorize. And that is how you get your answer. And of course, if you have time, if you want to check to see if your answer is correct, we use the distributive law on these two brackets, and you should get back exactly what is at the top here. So that is how you can check to see if your answer is correct. So of course, let's work some more examples. 3x squared plus 14x plus 8. We want to factorize this quadratic. So step 1, identify A, B, and C. So let's do A is equal to, in this case, 3. B is equal to 14, and C is simply equal to 8. Identify A, B, and C. Step 2, you multiply A by C. So AC would be 3 multiplied by 8, which will give me 24. So the value of AC is 24, very important number. So the next thing, we want two numbers, two factors. When we multiply these two numbers, we should get this 24. And when we add these two same numbers, we should get B, which is 14. So we think to ourselves, 3 plus 8, that would not give you 14, so that can't work. So we box our brains and we think we can do another 2 factors. So let's try 12 multiplied by 2 would indeed give me 24, and 12 plus 2 would give me 14. So ding ding ding, we found our 2 numbers, 12 plus 2. So we take the 12 plus the 2 and we're replacing it with bx. In this case, bx is the 14x. So we'll have 3x squared plus 12x plus 2x plus 8. And then we pair off, and then we factorize each bracket individually. So we look at the first bracket, we see 3x squared plus 12x. We look at the numbers, 3 and 12. We see 3 is the highest common factor there. We look at the variables, we see x squared and x. We see x is the highest common factor there. So when we factor out 3x from 3x squared, we're left with x. When we factor out 3x from 12x, we see we are left with 4. And then we go to the second bracket. You always factor out whatever sign is here. If it's a negative sign, you factor out that negative sign. So we factor out, in this case, we have a plus. So we factor out the plus, and then we see the numbers 2 and 8. What is the highest common factor between 2 and 8? We see 2. We have x, and we don't have any other variable, so there's no variable in common. So we factor out the 2. When we factor out the 2 from the 2x, we're left with x. When we factor out the 2 from the 8, we see we're left with 4. So our brackets are the same. That means we did something absolutely correct, and we should give ourselves a tap on the shoulder. So we take what is outside the bracket and we put it in the bracket. So we'll have 3x plus 2, and then we bring down one in the other bracket, which would be x plus 4. And that is the answer. And that is how you factorize that quadratic. So let's look at the final example. Let's mix and match with some signs. This example is 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. So you're mixing and matching with some signs. You have some negatives and we have some positives. So let's see how this will work. So step 1, of course, we identify A, B, and C. So we see A is equal to 2. We see B is equal to negative 7. And we see C is equal to 3. Identify A, B, and C. Step 2, we multiply A by C. So A by C will give you 2 multiplied by 3, and this will give you 6. So this is the big step now. We want 2 numbers. When we multiply it, we should get AC, which is 6. But when we add these 2 numbers, we should get B, which is negative 7. So of course, you see we have to get a negative 7. So you got to think. So we can do some trial and error. So 2 plus 3 would give you 5, so that can't work. So let's think about if we have a negative 6 multiplied by a negative 1. Now a negative times a negative would give you a positive, and 6 times 1 would give you 6. So we have the product. We have 2 numbers. When we multiply it, we get 6. Well, let's see now, when we add these 2 numbers, if we will get the negative 7. So we see when it's a negative, we have to mix and match with our sign. Sometimes let's say AC was a negative, we know you'll have to get a positive number, the negative number. So when B is a negative, you know, a negative number must be involved somehow. So that is how you can have your thinking. That's how you can, think. Right? When you have the signs, you have to think about one will be positive, one will be negative. So let's see now, negative 6 plus negative 1 would give us, these 2 negatives will cancel out to give you minus. So it's 6 minus 1, that would give you a negative 7. So ding, 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 we have our 2 numbers. So it's negative 6 minus 1. So we'll have now 2x squared minus 6x minus 1x. But of course, we know we don't really write back this one. So it's minus x plus 3. And then we factor out. We pair off. Now this is the part we have to be extremely careful with. So we go to the first bracket. So we see we have 2x squared minus 6x. So we see the highest common factor between the numbers. We see 2 and 6. So we see 2 is the highest common factor between that. Then we have x squared and we have x. So we see x is the highest common factor. So when we factor out the 2x from the 2x squared, we're just left with x. And when we factor out the 2x from the 6x squared, we are left with 3. Now this is the part that will cause a lot of problem. We have minus x plus 3. Now, earlier I said whatever sign is in front there, you have to factor it out. Whatever sign is here, you have to factor it out. So we have to factor out that minus sign. So we factor out the minus and we see x and we see 3. So we see the highest common factor between there would be 1. So the highest common factor there would be minus 1. Now this is where we gotta be careful. So when we factor out, we have negative x and we factor out negative 1. That means we're dividing by negative 1. This will go with that. So x divided by 1 would simply give you x. And now we have plus 3. And we want to factor out the negative 1. That means we're divided by negative 1. So plus 3 divided by negative 1. A positive divided by a negative would give you a negative. And 3 divided by 1 would give you 3. So this would be x minus 3. You see, when we factor out a positive sign, no sign in the bracket will change. But if it's a negative sign, the signs will change. So we have to be careful when we factor out a negative. So we see the two brackets are the same. Now the two brackets have to be the same. The signs have to be the same. Everything got to be the same. So what we do now, we take what is outside the bracket, 2x minus 1 in one bracket and x minus 3. Now it doesn't, you can write it like this, but it doesn't matter if you put x minus 3 and 2x minus 1. It doesn't matter which one of the brackets you put first because they will be the same things. Like you got 2 times 3, that would be the same thing as 3 times 2. Both of them will give you the same answer. So either this or this could work. With that being said, that brings us to the end of factorizing quadratic expressions. Now I will leave this one for you to try on your own. 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. Until then, I'll see you again in the next video. Take care.